All right, live to Newmarket now, Ontario Liberal leader Steven Del Duca making a platform announcement.
All of that land, the source water protection built into this, this notion that we could preserve this land, that we could build, safer and more sustainable communities, that we could do all of this work, something that we accomplished here in this province. I think back to the decision a number of years ago to close coal to generate our electricity, to help deal with childhood asthma and all of the other challenges that people were facing at that point in time. I think about the moment when we as a province decided that we were going to put a price on carbon pollution, creating cap and trade, for example. I think of all of this progress and more, because people here in Newmarket, Aurora, and people across Ontario, well, they want to know that there's a government in place at Queen's Park that takes these issues seriously. They also know that over the past 4 years, the Ford Conservatives have dragged us backwards in so many different ways. It's a long list when you think about how they have undermined environmental protections. Think back to the idea that they eliminated that price on carbon pollution that I talked about just a moment ago, when they eviscerated conservation authorities and took away their capacity to do the work that we need them to do, especially when we're talking about flood protection. I think about their reckless decision to be obsessed with building Highway 413 that will cost $10+ billion, pave over wetlands and farmland, and destroy a large chunk of the Greenbelt right here in York Region. I think of the $30 million of hard-earned tax dollars, yours and mine, that Doug Ford and his team decided to waste on radio and television ads and paying lawyers to fight the federal government in court, forcing small business owners to use gas pump stickers that didn't actually stick. I think of all of this, and it's very clear that when it comes to protecting and strengthening our environment in this province, when it comes to doing our part to confront the climate crisis, the Ford Conservatives are determined to only go backwards. We can't afford that in this province. I have said repeatedly over the last number of days, and I will continue to say, this election campaign is about a choice, a stark choice, a choice between those Ford Conservatives who don't believe in the climate science, who don't believe in making the right kinds of investments to make sure that our environment is protected, and a new Ontario Liberal team, including Sylvain Roy and so many others, who have ideas and plans to move us forward in the right way. And speaking of those plans and ideas that we have, I was so excited yesterday to announce one of the key elements of how we will protect our environment, how we will do our part in this province once again to fight the climate crisis, when I announced that Ontario Liberal government would reduce the price of taking transit, both provincial transit and municipal transit, right across Ontario, bringing that price down to $1 per ride, $1 a ride province-wide, as I said repeatedly yesterday. We know that would help to take 400,000 cars off Ontario's roads. And more than that, we know that it would empower Ontario families to make choices to do their part to help create a stronger and healthier environment and to confront the climate crisis. And there's something really important in that notion. Every single Ontarian with whom I've spoken over the last 2 years since becoming leader, they understand why it's so important for this generation, but also for the next generation, to protect our environment, to make it safer and healthier and more resilient, and to do something to fight the climate emergency, which they know is spiraling in the wrong direction, especially given how the Ford Conservatives have moved us backwards. There are so many parts of the Ontario Liberal plan to tackle the climate crisis and to protect our environment that do exactly that. Empower everyday Ontarians to help them make the right kinds of decisions. So Buck a Ride province-wide is a great example of that. And let me just say before I provide more details about our plan, it was deeply disappointing for me to learn that both the Ford Conservatives and Ms. Horvath and the NDP yesterday chose to attack the idea of Buck a Ride province-wide instead of acknowledging that it's actually a good idea, that it's something that will help the affordability crisis, it's something that will help against the climate crisis, it's something that will help us build more sustainable communities. I said this yesterday afternoon. I think it's so important, especially in this day and age, coming out of this pandemic, for leaders to have the self-confidence and the humility to realize that they don't have every single answer, and that opponents can, from time to time, have good ideas. A Bucka Ride province-wide is an idea whose time has come. It is something that I am passionate about. Our entire team is passionate about it. It is something we are determined to deliver on. And I would strongly urge Doug Ford and Andrea Horwath to rethink their initial knee-jerk opposition to the idea, acknowledge that it's a good idea, and get on board, because this is something that I will continue to talk about for the rest of this campaign. And should I earn the honor of becoming Ontario's Premier, it is something that I and our team will deliver on. So, in terms of the other elements of the Ontario Liberal plan to tackle the climate crisis and to make sure that we have a strong and healthy environment, I just want to provide a couple of the other key highlights. First of all, an Ontario Liberal government will ensure that carbon pollution in this province is cut in half by 2030 and that our province achieves a net zero status by 2050. We are going to strengthen, for example, the requirements of the existing industrial emissions performance standards to ensure that the biggest emitters that we have in this province are doing their part to hit those strong targets, those reduction targets that I mentioned just a second ago. We're going to expand the Greenbelt. I know I talked about it a moment ago. We're going to expand the Greenbelt in many important ways. We're going to protect more space across this province, and we are going to specifically designate 30% of Ontario's land as protected, up from the current 10%. I mentioned Highway 413 just a moment ago. I could not be any more clear about Highway 413. It is a reckless project that Doug Ford is obsessed with. $10 billion to destroy parts of the Greenbelt, to raise over and bulldoze protected spaces, to make sure that farmland and wetlands are lost to us forever. Billions of dollars to save only a small handful of commuters mere seconds. Ontario Liberals were the first party to stop this highway, and if elected come June 2nd, we're going to kill it once and for all. I think that's so important. We're going to create, working with Ontarians, we're going to create 25,000 new green jobs and kickstart a new green jobs fund in this province to invest in made in Ontario clean tech and clean energy solutions. And we're going to provide grants of up to $3,000, 100,000 grants of up to $3,000, so that everyday Ontarians and businesses, particularly small businesses, who want to make eco-friendly choices actually have the financial support to do so. You know, earlier in my remarks, I talked about why it's so important for us to make sure that people are enabled and empowered to do the right thing. It is what Ontarians tell us they want. That's why it's so important for us to provide these grants. Earlier, I also referenced how this province of ours was once a leader in the fight against the climate crisis. Imagine for a moment that collectively in this province, thanks to decisions and leadership shown by Ontario Liberals.
All right, Liberal Leader Steven Del Duca making a platform announcement in Newmarket, in the park, talking about the climate crisis, talking about Bucka Ride province-wide, public transit, one of the pledges from his government if he's elected, getting millions of cars off the road, reducing carbon footprint, and expanding the Greenbelt.